and I'm happy that we can have this conversation. So today's session, Multidimensional Dancefloors, Spatial Sound and New Modes of Listening within Night Culture. Here we focus on not something new, something which has a long tradition of listening, of technological development, but also of artistic research. But I have four guests who are in their own way connected to this history and to the present and also the future, shaping it. Before I'll introduce the session, I would like to introduce all of you. Welcome. First, I start with you, Femke. Femke Dekker is a sound practitioner who works both as an artist and as an educator. Also, the educational part is very important for you. She centers on listening as a method and a material. Under the moniker of Loma Doom, she develops a distinctive form of electronics experimentalism that moves between introspective and physical registers, seeking out nonlinear and intuitive sonic paths. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nicolas Geysens. Do I say it right?
Geysens.
I should do it in a Flemish way. We're in the Flemish Culture House, and I'm not doing it correct. I'm sorry. Is a co-developer in artistic relations at AMBRIO, a Brussels-based startup developing a spatial DJ and performance mixer. As part of the founding team, he works closely with artists to integrate spatial sound into their practice, translating creative needs into the design and the functionality of the instrument. Alongside his work at AMBRIO, he has an extensive career as a DJ and producer, over 15 years of international experience. Alberta, Balsam, welcome, is a producer and DJ with a love for science fiction that permeates through everything she does, and she has worked with spatial sound in the past as a composer and a performer. And as a DJ, Alberta's sets incorporate a signature blend of left-field techno, electro, IDM, broken beats and breaks, and having trained as a, and there I go, epidemiologist. Do I say
epidemiologist.
It? Epidemiologist. That's the last one that I'm missing. Exactly. The theme of care reverberates through her music. And last but not least, Rohlf, welcome from CTM Festival. You've been an active figure in the Berlin art scene and music scene since the mid-90s. Co-founder and artistic director of the CTM Festival, a key platform for experimental sound and media since 1999, and also co-founded DISC, the initiative for Build on Tone, and DISC agency supporting artists working across audiovisual practices. Welcome to all of you. Today, we're going to talk about spatial sound and new modes of listening within night culture. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and I'm going to then dive right in with the questions. So we're currently experiencing a shift in electronic music and club culture, not new as I said, but a new momentum, where audiences, producers and DJs and promoters are increasingly focusing on listening events and unique sonic experiences. The attention for listening context, sound systems and spatial sound and immersive sound experiences has enormous momentum at the moment. Worldwide, more and more unique spatial sound systems, immersive media and listening folks locations are opening. Sound system builders are experimenting with new setups, and alternative locations or listening contexts are formed. Simultaneously, there's a change in behavior amongst audiences, with the rise of a more grounded relationship with night culture and the interest in more spatial and embodied dimensions of sound. In this panel, we try to explore and envision how these developments will influence the future dance floor, or maybe the present dance floor, and how electronic music performances form also space and vice versa. The questions are, where are we now? What access do artists have in accessing current waves of immersive sound developments? And how can a focus on new listening cultures potentially change the production experience of sound and music? I would also like to thank Resident Advisor for organizing the first and this session with us and hosting the panel together. And as I said, welcome, dear guests. I want to start with first maybe touching upon the basic, making a quick round and also make it quick maybe, if I can ask you. If we talk about spatial sound, what does that mean to you?
Relational. I'm going to keep it very short.
Okay, we'll come back to that later.
I'm also very loud. I'm reverberating into space.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. Relational.
Thanks.
I was going to say social, but that's too similar, I guess. I would say natural, natural form of listening.
Yeah, I think usually dance floors are very one-directional, so it comes from the DJ and it's projected onto the audience. And I think the spatial environment can provide a more like enveloping experience and a different way in which we can be on either a dance floor but also in a performance, like more in a listening context, can provide different things, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think relational is very good. Spatial, I think, is a really broad range, right? From the physical built space to imaginary spaces, memory spaces, our bodily experience that creates different types of perception. So the interconnections, the interplay of all these different factors, infrastructure, build infrastructure, knowledge spaces, the actual propagation of sound and so on, and our bodily perception, and just to raise maybe awareness and consciousness to how these different elements can interact. This is what spatial means to me currently in the context of sound and music or our practices.
Thank you. Maybe I can follow up with a question. Maybe could you introduce the project that you're working on, the long-term project, the fifth year at CTM, and the events that you've been doing?
Well, it's actually pretty simple. We have been doing projects that somehow incorporate this question of thinking about these entanglements and between all these different elements that can be called spatial since, I guess, the beginning when we started doing cultural events, music events, because it's always there, right? Sound and how we perceive sound and our bodies in a space, it's always spatial. So, but then over the years, of course, we have done projects that accentuate it in different ways, and we just thought lately that we want to give this a container of sorts, because we restructured our programming in that way that we have longer research strands in a way, and we give them a name and to build a context for whatever we put into it. So the fifth year is just this new container for something that we're already doing since a long time. And it's pretty undefined. I chose this word or this title, the fifth year, because we have the 3 dimensions, the Newtonian space, X, Y, Z, and then we have time in music and sound. It's an important factor. It's the 4th dimension, and then you have stuff like the 4D sound system and so on, riffing off on that. But if you think it further, then of course there is way more elements to it. As I just already said, you have the infrastructure, you have the body, you have all that symbolic and memory space, the knowledge space. And that's why we said, okay, it's the 5th year, right? Just to be a bit provocative or to say like, okay, we can't stop here. It's more than that, but it's undefined. I don't know how many dimensions we're talking about. And so this project should just explore this in multiple ways in different projects with different types of activities, from the club domain to sound art and learning practices, and also discursive elements and so forth. So there is really no clear path. We go as we go. It's also kind of an experimental way of exploring that space.
Thank you. And maybe connecting it with you were saying relational, also, interesting to hear your thoughts about what makes relational important within spatial sound experiences, practices, or working with it.
Well, I think what Jan is saying, to have a 5th ear and to have that 5th ear incorporate many forms of listening and have the body, whether it's a human or more than human body, connect to one another. And also, Anik, what you were saying about this one-directional way of, that how we've traditionally moved in spaces, whether it's in a club or whether it's through performances. I'm really interested in exploring with others this notion of disseminating through sound and exchanging knowledge through sound and having the body there, and also allowing for this line between, performer and participant to kind of dissolve and to really be in spaces together. I think for me right now, the core of what I'm interested in is indeed this knowledge sharing and how to kind of do that together, but also have that done with musicians and what we would call the non-musicians, because I do feel sound brings in all these possibilities of thinking otherwise. And why should we keep that thinking behind a gate of skills or access to technology? I think so of course as a panel you get questions sent to you beforehand so you can ponder upon them and you kind of know what we're going to discuss, and I'm so curious to hear what you thought of these questions. But my first reaction was imposter syndrome, fully. I read the questions and I was like, what am I doing on this panel? And then of course, having learned a little bit to embrace my position as an imposter, as someone who never went to conservatoire, who's never been to art school actually. I've only been calling myself an artist. I've been completely DIY for the last 3 years, but I've been teaching in art education and I've been performing as an artist for 10, 15 years. But to embrace that imposter system and then to think about what does technology then mean to me if I've never learned how to play an instrument? And if everything is self-taught, how do I navigate my access to it? And I would like to open that access to making music and sounding and using sound, again, as a dissemination for knowledge, for knowing and unknowing and unlearning, especially, to make that key.
Also, I think very interesting your practice, and maybe we can make that shift now from spatial, immersive sort of technologies to listening, because listening is what you center your practice around. How does these different spaces and this different way of experiencing sound, music, also being together in a space, also where sound moves and sound is not always at the same moment at the same time, how does that change the listening experience? And could you say something from the idea of listening what are you interested in that space?
Yeah, again, I think it's very much, I always say that, so my practice is heavily built around the work of Pauline Oliveros. I don't know if, I assume that most people know her in this space. She was an American composer who coined the term deep listening. And most people have heard of deep listening, but they don't actually know what it is. But deep listening is a practice of being in a space together and listening to one another in order to give something your radical attention. So for me, listening is really about giving something your radical attention and then to stay with it and to share that attention with others. Because the moment you start listening, there will be consequences. And those consequences can be another action. So whether that's a musician listening to another musician during a jam and then, interplaying on that, or whether that's through dialogue or through building a space together, building communities together. So I'm also really interested in the notion of listening being facilitated in so-called third spaces and spaces that allow everyone to be part of it. That's also why, of course, then with this, kind of attention to listening in the past few years, or renewed attention to listening, because Oliveros was already doing this in the 70s. I want to kind of move away from this notion of listening as commodification or immersion as commodification as well, which is also what we see happening around us, in both clubs and in festivals. We know that everything is so captivated and enclosed by this neoliberal system that we're in and that we just feel is so impossible to move out. That has consequences for the listening. And it also has consequences for the listening, how that's being facilitated. And if you look at all these listening bars that are popping up left and right, are they really listening bars? Or are they expensive cocktail bars where you have natural wine?
Fair question.
Good question.
So what is a listening space? What is if we are curating spaces that tend to listening, what do we need to listen to? And I think that's my first question, even before just thinking about the notions of spatiality.
Thank you. Alberta, maybe can I bring the question to you, because in your practice also care and attention is a very important part of what you do. Also having experience as composing for spatial sound experience or listening experience, are you relating to what Femke is saying? Can you jump off of that?
Yeah, I think it's a really big challenge to be really present. We also talked about it in the last panel, but it's really a challenge to be present in the moment. And I think this is what music in general, both listening and club experiences can really facilitate, to have this presence. And it doesn't always have to be delicate. It can also be like super aggressive or intense. Yeah, and then I was really interested in what you were saying about the non-musicians also being a part of this experience, because I was thinking a lot about the thing of spatiality, and that to execute it, it's already really complicated to make a super well-sounding stereo mix. So once you go further with it and you start making it a spatial project, it becomes very complex, very fast. So it's not that accessible. For example, I created this installation for a museum in Eindhoven, which was like, it was an elevator, so with 4 speakers, and people could descend into the Earth's core. So I made a soundscape at home. I even replicated like the speaker system with like having 4 speakers like on this whole. I like built a whole thing to replicate this exact speaker setup. And then when I would get to the museum, it would still sound completely different because of the space and because of even when there would be 5 or 7 people inside the space, it would be different. So it's such a complex thing to do spatial sound. In a way that really translates well what you intended as an artist.
Can I ask what your intention was? Because I'm actually very curious about it. Is then the intention being led by the technology, or?
In this case, the intention was to give a certain illusion of having, like descending into the Earth's core. So it was quite a, how would you say it, like Efteling kind of illusion. You want to, sounds maybe a bit condescending towards my own work.
The Efteling is a theme park for people who don't know.
So we just wanted to have this illusion of like you were descending all the time. So it wasn't really typical, like a really certain effect that we were going for. But yeah, and also I have a video of a Conflux festival where I created, so this is Line AV. This is an installation by Joris Strijbos with 24 speakers that are placed along a line. And then I could control 3 parameters. Yeah, you can see it here. So yeah, it's iPhone audio, but just to show like that I did this project, and it was quite. I worked 2 weeks on it for like one show, and Joris Strijbos created this installation with an idea of like other people could perform on the installation, but I needed to know like max MSP, and then I could control like 3 parameters, so 2 lights, either the top or the bottom lights, and the audio could be spatialized. And it already took me like a week to learn the specific interface and then to translate it to a composition that made sense, and where the spatialization of the things that I composed also were audible, so it's not too complex, you know, because if you are going all over the place with your sounds and there's something there and there's something there, it is too much for a listener to comprehend. Then I think when we are, it is also when we are in nature, and there are all kinds of sudden sounds around us. It also indicates danger, so you have to be very careful with having like all kinds of unexpected sounds coming from all over the place. Don't know if it's an answer to the question, but
Thank you. Maybe interesting what you're already touching upon is like the accessibility of these technologies that we talk about, or the steep learning curve to get into either the tech or the spaces, or the having the finances to kind of work with them. I think we'll touch upon this a little bit later, but I also want to give a word to you, Nicolas, because you've been developing a mixer especially for lowering a threshold for nightlife performers, DJs, to be able to perform in spatial sound. Maybe would you first like to introduce the mixer and the vision behind what you're doing?
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, everything that's been said here is already quite overwhelming, actually. I would want to dive in these topics for like 4 or 5 hours. They're super interesting, and yeah, meta things that we talk about while we are developing and designing this mixer, because we want to avoid being in a tunnel vision. So the short story is that our founder, Ulrich, did his thesis on specialization algorithms 5-6 years ago, and he was a bit frustrated with the fact that he was going to shows and having this experience of sound being delivered to you from a person upstage, just one directional. He was a bit frustrated about that, and he was thinking about how can we make this easier for people to use the space in an accessible way. So he did some prototypes before, and then 2 years ago I joined their team. I'm a DJ first and foremost. I've been DJing 15-20 years. So the first time I heard the mixer, the prototype back then, 2 years and a half ago, that's the first time I heard spatial sound, actually, and this was a very simple execution of just a stereo track being moved around, and yeah, it's triggered something very profound, and ever since we've been talking about these very topics that we've mentioned before, the bigger scheme of things, the experience in general of being with the crowd and experiencing music, this commodification, this complete commercialization of our club and music industry that had really detrimental effects. And all of these discussions, all of this thinking exercise, we try to translate into a device that makes it as easy as possible for an artist to start experimenting and playing around with spatial sound, and eliminating all these barriers, some of which I've heard already, both from an artist's perspective, as an organizer, as a sound engineer perspective, to exactly lower the threshold completely and make it fun, not too complicated, not overwhelming, instinctive. Because when we talk to artists still today, I would say the majority of artists that we talk to equally have the twinkle in their eyes, or like, oh wow, this is amazing, I've never thought about that, I've never heard about that, and at the same time have the reaction of, it's already much for me to keep my artistic status and to keep the way that I express myself, so maybe don't scare me with a new dimension, you know. So finding the balance between those all those elements has been our challenge, and yeah, right now we're at a stage where we are locking in the design, and we're quite confident that I think we struck the balance that is necessary to make it accessible and easy for everyone. That's what we do with AMBRIO. So I'm very excited to share these concepts that we integrated in the mixer with more experienced artists like yourselves.
And can you maybe say something of the feedback that you're getting from people that are experimenting or playing with it? Like, how do they experience the mixer? What gives them the opportunity that they otherwise not have, maybe? What is the impact of they feel on the crowd that when they play?
Well, it needs to be said that the majority of the artists that have played with the mixer have not necessarily been artists that were already well versed in spatial audio. So they were approaching it also from their perspective, as many artists have been using stereo sound forever. So, I mean, what I was talking about earlier, that duality between, oh, this is overwhelming, and this is super exciting that we can trigger and express ourselves using this new dimension. So they are curious, they are eager, they are sometimes a bit scared. So we have to take that into account. But it's just a beautiful time to be alive. I think we can now all together decide how we could use this dimension. I mean, I know that I'm talking about it from my perspective, and spatial sound has been around for a long time. But I really feel that we have something in our hands that we can use for the good of the evolution of how we experience music.
Yeah, and also I think that then really allows for again participants or audience performer to come together in a space where both the audience is learning, but as well as the performer. So if they're not that nervous, you can just see it as a live learning zone.
Absolutely,
where you're just learn together.
Absolutely.
So that is amazing.
An important feature on the mixer is this big orange button. We call it home. We call it, you can see it there. That's your home base. So if you press that, then sound is coming from all the speakers in an equal way, and you can start experimenting from there. So you can hear this and for the audience, this is very triggering as well. It is some kind of improvisation per definition, because the artists, many of the artists that use the mixer have not used it often before. And you can hear this. You can hear a very fragile, artistic feeling when artists explore this for the first time. If something is a bit too tempting or overwhelming, that too many sounds are coming from everywhere, they press the orange button, we're back home, and then gives a sense of relaxation, and then they can start to experiment again and see where it takes them. So this part of experimentation, we try to incorporate it into the design, actually. Yeah.
I have so many questions about how this works. Like, what if you send out the audio? Will it always be like a 4D system, or can it be different speaker configurations?
For now, we're keeping the 2D plane because of a productional point of view. It's not always easy to incorporate a height layer. And also for the artists that are just entering spatial sound, we don't want to have them have to think about elevation just yet. And we could implement it, but we're starting from a 2D plane. And basically, we built the mixer so that the artist doesn't need to be a sound engineer. You just hook up a couple of speakers, 4 speakers, 6 speakers, 8 speakers, or digitally as many speakers as you want. You put them in a rectangle or a square or a circle. And then there's like an adaptive ambisonics algorithm that translates well on basically any setup possible. So it's, I mean, we wanted to lower the threshold also for venues and festivals to integrate spatial sound to their event. But I can tell you all about it.
I'm also like, did you bring one? Can we try it out?
Maybe one important element that I can mention on top of that, this is the previous prototype. We've been working for the last 3-4 months on our final design. And a very important step forward for me is the incorporation of a dry-wet function, which means that basically you have your audio sources and they're playing from all around. And then per channel you have a dry-wet button, which just means that you can choose to go towards a spatial status of an object freely. You can express your spatiality just to have control over how much do I want, how much of this feeling do I want to incorporate, how much contrast do I want here. This was lacking on the previous device, so it was a bit all or nothing in a sense. Which often gave cool results because it's more direct and you could hear abrupt things happening, so it's a bit more quick. But now you have, it's a refinement. Now you can choose as an artist how far you go into this spatial state of an object, which is an important, again, it plays on that sense of security that you have from a home base, and then you go towards the unknown. Basically.
But also a time, and again, this notion of stretching time when you come together in a space where sound is facilitated, because I think for me, and I think you have that as well, right? We're trying to stretch time, like this nanosecond becomes infinity, and I think that really allows it. I also like the fact that although it's a mode of control, but that this overwhelmingness, and because I like the overwhelmingness, I like the fact that sound, and again, this like we've talked about this before, we know each other, about this notion of like, okay, why is everything that has to do with attentiveness and listening, why does that have to come out in an ambient form? it shouldn't. Sound
Yeah.
is also
Yeah.
meant as a disruptor. And in order for people to notice that they're listening, that listening or the hearing needs to be disrupted in order to really listen and to give something your radical attention. And I like the fact that overwhelming people with sounds and playing with that overwhelming and going back home, bringing them back home, grounding them, but then going into, all the potential that disruption has as well.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is a
Oh, no?
sorry, but this exactly is a concept that goes beyond the stereo or spatial. This is a concept that artists use to communicate and to have an audience communicate with the artists between themselves, etc. So, yeah.
I think it's a super interesting product because a couple of weeks ago I actually did this experimental live set together with another hardware live act where we would do a live act like with hardware instruments in Metropole in Enschede, and they had this spatial sound system. So the only option for us to make it spatial was to have certain stems of our music go to the sound engineer, and then he would just decide per stem what would be spatialized and what would like go out in the normal speakers. But it had so many nice things, as in at certain points it sounded great, but also at certain points it was just really weird. So this would give it more control, but it also would mean that you would have to be in a good spot, so you cannot be on the side.
You can be. There is a monitoring output. So
Yeah,
you
but
can-
then you have a spatial monitoring?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well,
So, but
maybe I want to bring it back to you, Jan. Also worked together on 2 events with the mixer, but in general, the history of CTM, we're working with spatial sound for such a long time, and also sound art. When we talk about these developments and also talk about the need for a new type of listening or new type of a new type of sound aesthetics outside of the ambient and the listening bars, where do you see CTM going with the future of spatial sound within the festival? Where would you like it to go?
Well, first of all, as I said, I think all of this is not new. We have some new developments and currently a shift in attention, which is great. And I think we want just to push that shift further because it's a good thing. I mean, we lost maybe this knowledge about this ever-present spatial dimensions that we're always enmeshed with because of the stereo concept maybe, or the way concerts and even club nights have been configured in a very kind of homogeneous, standardized way throughout the years. And I think we have also people nowadays who probably hardly ever listen to acoustic music or acoustic sound. They only know headphones and stereo speakers at home and so forth. And if you present some actual acoustic music that is unamplified, and suddenly there's all this spatiality naturally evolving, but that's the normal state of things, right? And now we just come back full circle with technology that allows us to go back to this, reproduce it more naturally, but then of course also to play with it in a creative and unusual way, and kind of steer things up, destabilize things. And I think this is of course what's interesting and what we want to do. And I guess, I don't know, from my personal listening history, destabilizing and then again restabilizing my reality is somehow what I'm looking for when I'm engaging with music or sound art. And this is also what I'm looking for on a dance floor in a way. I think that's also what a DJ is actually doing in a sense. And it gives, in the best way possible, if it works, I think it gives you a sense of agency, even if you are the listener and not the DJ in that case. Right, my example, I was thinking this morning, maybe I'm rambling a bit, but about examples, and I was coming back to when I was a teenager. I was actually driving with my bicycle at night through the city with headphones on, and I was listening to this band called Sonic Violence, which was this kind of skinhead, very heavy, aggressive band with 2 drum kits and 2 bass guitars and whatnot. And at this moment, I had this feeling of, oh, I'm driving a tank through the city, basically. And the city makes way for me, right? It was completely modulating my perception, the space that I'm in, and so forth. And I felt like I can do that, right? Through my listening, I can actually create that reality, co-create it, maybe. And I think that's happening on all sorts of levels, also on the dance floor. So I think we just want to explore this in the broadest range possible by all sorts of ways, so including the AMBRIO mixer and the club night, but as well, say, in a completely acoustic way, or in a totally lab situations where people are actually building things on the fly and do it with very little means and rather kind of experiment with, I don't know, all sorts of accessible technologies. I think there is no one way, and that's the thing that we need to push forward, that we go beyond standardization and standardized concepts, although they are helpful in certain settings, for sure. I mean, how would you run a festival or organize a concert if there weren't certain protocols and standardized technologies? But to keep that space as wide and open as possible and build the attention and the knowledge and the consciousness about that you can engage with that in such a way, and you're not bound to this one way that is presented to you. Yeah, and that's what I also like actually then about Nicolas and the AMBRIO mixer here, if we speak about club culture, because it's an attempt to, as you already explained, to give a low threshold device that can actually be embedded in any kind of given sonic infrastructure. And it's not bound to a specific company, proprietary, whatever systems. And I think that's what's really cool about it. And I don't know, I lost track now.
No.
Sorry.
No, it's a very clear track. I want to follow that track a bit. What do you think, or the others, if you feel like responding, is also a bit of a danger here? We talk about these developments that are happening. There's quite a momentum now, quite a lot of big kind of systems, technologies, protocols. What should we be afraid of in this new attention to spatial sound, coming from maybe a more technical perspective? Or I think you talked about already, like formats and protocols.
Yeah, I think as always you can as well use the same, superficially the same approaches to close the space, right? You instead of opening it, I mean also like mentally in people's processing of all of that. We can get to like really standardized preset type of technology that is just projecting this illusion of choice, let's say, illusion of additional dimension or so. And actually it's just like a commodified product that should be rolled out as a mass market. And also drive this experiential economy that is just promising things that it doesn't really deliver. So I think that can easily happen, and in the communication about spatial audio, we see that a lot. It's like, yeah, novelty, innovation, of course, and then also this kind of spectacular, something to expect that is novel and new and really different and whatnot. But then the reality is usually just very subtle if it's done right. You know, it's not like a super high intensity punch to your brain that you like, wow, this is exciting. Rather, you have to reattune your listening, your experience, be attentive to different ways, different things, slightly shifting. You know, it's less spectacular than most people communicated who want to benefit from it. And I think this needs to be clear. We just need time and space to breathe it, to learn it, to attune to it, but it is not that sensational novelty that some people try to sell it. You know?
Yeah. Can I add that also begs us to look at the notion of ownership and authorship. Who owns this? who's it shared with, who has access, but also if we are specifically talking about clubs, and this is also like personal pet peeve, of course, where do we need to redefine what we think a club is? Because what I have seen, at least in the Netherlands, and I have to say I'm based here, but I don't play that much here. I actually play mostly in Germany or in France or in Italy, where there's maybe a bit more ground for the experimental stuff that I do, but that we also need to think about if this is not about commodification, but this is about attunement and about degrowth. And I think for me, this is the most important thing, is to get away from this notion of experience, of revenue, of fitting into this sensationalist system, to really redefine what we think a club can be, should be, for both audiences as well as performers.
Yeah, I thought maybe Nicolas, you can also say something, because we did some projects together, but what struck me at the time once was what I wasn't so much aware of when we started it, that with certain sound systems and then the spatial component, somehow the volume level in the room might be lowered in a way. So the actual physical sound pressure that is needed to create a certain feeling of volume is less than with other systems, which is a very healthy thing to do, of course. But it's hard to really calibrate it the right way. So we also struggled with delivering the energy that people also were expecting, the sound pressure that they are wanting as a physical bodily experience in the club, where of course the bass and everything needs to physically tactile, in a tactile way reach you. But so I guess that's a field that just needs to be explored, and we need to experiment with this and learn about it. But that's kind of an interesting field of tangent for me, where we live in a time when maybe, we're looking for a slightly more, healthy is the wrong way, the wrong word, but maybe less structurally violent or harmful situations, but without sanitizing them. So that's the difficulty here, and it's also at play when it comes to spatial audio in the club, for me at least. So it's something I'm thinking about. I have no clear compass just now, but yeah.
Alberta, maybe I would like to ask you, as a composer and a performer also, little bit taking from Jan, or just saying this kind of difference of experiencing the sound and maybe even having a different language to talk about the experience of sound in space. How do you feel is there a difference between playing in a DJ club set and doing a performance in spatial sound? What is the difference feeling for you as a performer?
I think, especially if you compare a DJ set to a live performance, that's already completely different, because as a live performer, every action you do is directly impacting the sound, at least like how I do it. Like some people just play Ableton clips and then maybe you have it a bit less, but no judgment there. But once you go into spatial sound, it means that you have another dimension that you have to think about. I think it can be quite a lot. So that's actually what I really agree on. It's already very hard to have your live performance, like get your gear and then go to a certain situation and then set your gear up and make sure that everything sounds nice, even in a stereo environment, is already quite a challenge. That's also, I think, why we have the standardization and why that's also a good thing. So you know that there is a certain way that things will sound and translate from how you intended them to be to the real life situation. So once you go into more experimental ways, I think then you need also much more time to prepare in the space and see how it sounds and kneaded towards like the space itself, so it fits to where you want it to be in.
But I have to say, in the sense that, I mean, I'm usually invited to come and do DJ sets, but for me, my DJ sets are very much my live sets. In the sense, the equipment that the club gives me is my instrument, and I bring in my field recordings, and I bring in all these layerings, and I have samples that I draw out. And so, in that sense, whenever you come to a club to share your sounds, you need to be aware of the space, right? But both in its intention, like where are you playing, even beyond these qualities of the technique that is facilitated in this space and listening to the space itself, but also just feeling like, what does this audience need, or what might they need? What kind of story might I bring tonight?
Yeah. And I was also thinking about what you said before about the dangers of spatial sound, and that it can easily be very gimmicky. So, for example, I went to this demonstration from one Dolby surround mixing person, and then you just hear like the airplanes are going over your head, and it's really crazy. So I thought what you were saying was really correct, is that it should sort of translate the natural world a bit more, and that it should be subtle and more like enveloping. And I think as artists or as composers, I think we need time to be in those kinds of environments, and we don't have those facilities at home to experiment with that and try as well, like, what makes sense and what feels right in this context of composing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this example. I just took a look at it this morning again, because for example, L Acoustics has this L Acoustics DJ, or what's it called, which is also an idea to create a spatial or a tool for spatial DJing within the L Acoustics Lisa system. But what they promise to do is, like, they have this basically real-time AI-driven stem extraction. So you play a stereo track, and then you can say like, oh, okay, I have vocals, I have bass, I have hi-hat or something, and you can kind of spatialize these elements separately from the rest. So the engine does that for you, but they really have just these 4 categories. They have vocals, bass, I think hi-hat or a rhythm or something, and then it's called all other. and then you can choose the all other and send that somehow around. And then they have a set of presets that you can use, and some faders and stuff to kind of modulate them a little bit. But that's what I mean. If we end there, then it's going to be really boring. Yeah. And I think we need to strike that balance between, like, something is accessible because it is also standardized to a degree, but then it needs to have levels of access to take it to more complexity and connect it to more things, and kind of have this more open API, so to say, right? And I hope that you're going to go down that route, because it's possible. It's not easy to find that balance, I think, but I think it should be possible. And then we can come to a good place. And that's also what we did. We also used the AMBRIO mixer in live sets, not only for DJing. So you can connect like a live set up with your MIDI controllers and things, and have additionally then the AMBRIO as a engine to do the spatialization. And that worked super well and was really interesting. So to have that openness, so it can really kind of go further than just this very simplified concept of spatial DJing. Yeah, that's important.
We are fully aware of that, of course. I mean, to the point almost that we don't want to call it a spatial mixer, but an instrument. I mean, this is just one of the dimensions that you have as an artist to express yourself musically. I mean, the first DJ didn't even beat match, and then we had faders, and then we had the frequency spectrum, and we could cut the bass. And then we introduced a filter, and then we introduced effects, and all of these can be used in many different ways for the artist to express themselves. And so the point of the mixer is indeed not to make something spin around and have some, wow, that's absolutely not. So we are fully aware of that. And yeah, that balance is something to look for, which is not easy because you wanna have tools and features that the expert users can use to go all the way, all in, and do anything they want to do. And at the same time, we also want to include the 80-90% of artists that have never ever even heard spatial sound, and say, hey, here's something else that you can use to make a contrast, to make a highlight, you know. So that's we want to be right in the middle there.
Femke, you're looking something up here.
Yeah. Okay, so again, if you've never read this, please read this. It's called Quantum Listening. It's one of the last publications that Polino Oliveros made. It has a beautiful introduction by Laurie Anderson. And I, as you see, it's much loved and touched and read and reread. And what I love, there's this sentence or phrase in there, and it says, DJs are remixing the artifacts of recorded music cultures as performances. They are listening differently. They are deconstructing recorded music and nursing recorded sound into live performances. Their listening and cultural flexibility is the future of music.
I mean, that's beautiful, and I would even make abstraction of the term DJ. I teach DJing also at an art academy in Belgium, and my first lesson is about the fact that the art of DJing or performing is not something that evolved in the late 70s. We are shamans for thousands of years, and we are gathering around, sharing rituals, sharing information, sharing an experience, and that's what it's about. And many of the things that we've been talking about are about this social experience in which many factors, and one of which is sound, play an important role. Yeah.
And I think that's also why we kind of like, if we can, or if there are spaces where we can redefine what we mean by a club. You know, a club is a hub, is a space where people come together. If we can redefine what we want those spaces to be.
But what's the biggest enemy? I don't want to be moralistic, but the biggest enemy of this all is money and profit.
Yeah,
that's the only driving force of us losing these magical moments that we're all looking for. And it's so paradoxical because we're looking for those moments and we are destroying them because we are just individualizing all the experiences and losing all this social chemistry.
Yeah, and I think it's well, and I think that is our responsibility as artists, as educators, as people that have clubs or book shows, is to see how we can make the people that we're dependent on in terms of funding, but also our audiences in terms of ticketing, to make them realize that we're there to stay with the sound for a while, to experiment, to listen. And I saw this amazing lecture by Anna Tsing. I don't know if I already said that on Wednesday, and she was so lovely. I don't know if you know her, writer who wrote an amazing book called Mushrooms at the End of the World, another book that everybody should read. But Anna is really talking about degrowth. And I think we need to enter a phase of degrowth, and we need to make the people that fund us or that allow us to exist, unfortunately, within this neoliberal system, to kind of value, degrowth and really practice that. I know it's a utopia, but I do think it's our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to be loud about this.
Maybe that's just a thought that I had about spatial sound. When I was thinking about it, it's also that it's a luxury to have spatial sound, as in it's already hard to maintain clubs with stereo sound, so having spatial sound and doing that in a proper way is, it's really a luxury.
Not always. I mean,
not always.
You have many clubs that have 4 or 6 speakers, and then that's it. You go ahead.
Yeah, true. If you, like with your mixer.
Well, I think there will be many more mixers, and you will be traveling around with them. I want to take a moment, thank you for the conversation, to also turn to our audience to see if anyone would like to chip in with a thought, or I see someone. Oh, I'll come to you later.
Sorry.
No worries. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a few comments. I will try to be concise. First thing is that spatial audio or spatial listening works the best when we are static, because the way it works is we have to if it's a little bit subtle, and it's mainly in like the high frequencies that we can localize things. So being static and not moving is the best way to really do the most out of it aesthetically. And when we are moving in a club, we are dancing, like usually that's what I do. And when we are dancing, we are losing most of it, and most of the mental images that we make out of the music are more related to the timbral qualities, like the timbre of the sound and our movements, and it's an interaction between them. So I think that's asked like a first important question about that. And I think the other part is that the workflow of making especially electronic music, and especially because Ableton is, and because what you said, like the tunes are stereo, then you can try to upmix and you can try to make stem separation with AI, but basically one of the main interests of using like distributed sources in space is that you will avoid a lot of masking effects between places where there are a lot of frequencies. So if you kind of like separate after they have been mixed, like you cannot recreate what was lost. So the other thing that would really give some interest to having spatial audio, if instead of having like stereo mixes, you had like, I don't know, 10 stems or whatever, and then you can redistribute them. Okay. But like from the situation we are in now, I think we are very, very, very long way from being able to this having any kind of like actual sense and kind of like justifying the extra cost that it is. Because I've been working on spatial audio for 25 years, but like in a club, if it's a good sound system, I'm perfectly fine with mono,
Of course.
I'm not sure whether I really think that spatial sound is best appreciated static, because I think especially if you have a stereo system in front of you and you turn around, then you really start to already change like what you hear. You will only hear it on the right side, but if it's a surround thing that you hear, then you can turn around and you can dance, and then you can have like a different experience when dancing. So
slow movements.
Yeah.
Like there is literature, there is some scientific documentation about that. Like slow movements help you figure out better.
And
Like
slow movement is also dancing.
Yeah.
Slow movement is also dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Just one thing. It's not always the only goal to be to have a realistic experience or to have a realistic experience. So in that sense, the biological truths can sometimes be thrown away and give way for artistic freedom.
Yeah. But yeah, just to add, I think if we go down that route, then DJing will transform and has to make sense of such possibilities. So as you just said, you will not come with your stereo tracks anymore. So you will prepare your material in a different way, and it will be that you need to be more hybrid. You bring probably a whole lot of stems with like separate kind of specific sound files and signature sounds and so on that you want to add on top of a certain bed that maybe gives you the stability that you're looking for, and then you start kind of dramaturging with those materials. And then I don't know what will happen in terms of what kind of sets are being built. I just noticed that when we started to just experiment with it now, for me, it wouldn't make much sense to do like a hard-hitting, low dramaturgy kind of set on which we often have in club culture these days. But it would make more sense to try to unfold some more narrative elements with the sounds that you choose and mix. Which has been, there were DJ styles also that were more heavy leaning on such ideas. So it will transform what people are making, and maybe it will transform how people then are moving to it as well.
And in that sense, like, because I'm really interested. I mean, I think if I reach a BPM of 110 at the end of a set, I'm like pushing myself. So I like to stay in the lows, but I also feel this notion of moving through club and bringing in different sounds and also just having people being, so for me, listening is also a bodily experience. You do it with your entire body. Oliveros has a beautiful exercise about your feet becoming your ears. But it's also about reattuning your body to the space constantly. And if you move through a story, and if you're, let's say you're reading a book, you also have a different pace of reading. And I would like that different pace of listening and a different pace of moving through a space kind of meet each other a bit more, or at least being experienced a bit more, to go from really slow to like a full-on mosh pit, to have all these elements come back in again, to also go back to this notion of what a community could be together, and that we're dependent on each other to have conversations. I mean, I'm all going like meta and philosophical here, but for me, this notion of getting together and exchanging thoughts, whether it's through our bodies that move together or through the sounds that we hear, but also experiencing different types of thoughts through sound, is so important. And I miss that so much right now. You know, everything is compartmentalized in my sense. And I really want different notions. I want live musicians. There was a time where live acts at clubs would be on all the time. Now they've been completely discarded, because also, again, this notion of like, you know, at least in the scene in the Netherlands, where you walk into a club at 11 p.m., you're going to hear exactly the same as you would at 7 a.m. And I'm just a bit sad for it. And I'm also sad. I also know it's not just me being, I mean, I love being an old woman and I love being angry. It's important. We need more angry women. But it's also a younger generation. You know, this notion, like what I see. So I teach students who are in their 20s. They have the same longing. They want the physicality to be brought back, but they also want like anger and a valid way to deal with anger, because the world is such a shit show right now, and the only place where we can either come together and share that anger, but also possibly change the world, is within these club communities, or is within, you know, spaces where sound is being shared.
We need new counterculture. This used to be
we
counterculture,
absolutely,
so
yeah. No, I mean, that's also why I, for instance, have this intense love for radio. Because radio, for me, is that space where we can all come together, you know, especially with independent radio that we have, where you're, like, I have a show here, I have a few shows, I have too many radio shows, but I have this one show here, and then the person who has the show after me, it's called the Screamo listening sessions. And it's all this Screamo bands that I've been out of punk and hardcore for ages, but because of him, I've just got reacquainted with this whole vibrant scene of Screamo and hardcore out there. And I want to meet people like that. You know, I don't want to stay in my bubble of left field electronics. Yeah.
I want to go to someone that had a question at the top.
I kind of wanted to suggest something also, because I have a project for surround guitar, and I used Envelope for Live. I don't know if anyone knows that. It's like a software made by a non-profit, and it's open source and free. And it's for Ableton, and of course Ableton is the most used music production software. And it also works with ambisonics, so you can just tell it how many speakers you have, and it will generate the algorithm, and every track in Ableton you can send to it, and it has many tools to make the surround spatial sound for every track. So talking about the accessibility of the spatial sound, I just had to think about this and wanted to chip it in as a recommendation for checking.
Thank you. We have to have a list with books. With just keep your notes. Anyone?
What? Hey, sorry, it's quite
Hey.
I work in the Children's Theatre in Frankfurt, and I'm really interested in this idea of generating a new audience of listeners, and I really like working with children because they are so active and engaged in their listening, but they aren't quiet and they aren't still. and they respond immediately. And so you kind of get that idea of you are always in conversation, you never have this wall between you. And I also really want to introduce this idea, because I love club culture, I've worked in it and I've done DJing and it's about how to integrate that into a performance space and work with these kids, because they get taken out of school for an hour. And then they get to be taken in a whole other reality where they can do whatever they want, basically, and then they get put back into the school system. And I think it's really interesting, because it's about how do we get people into clubs or find their ways, their stepping stones into creating these crowds, and how can we interact with each other and have that fifth dimension. Sorry, now I'm getting a bit lost in my head. But I think there's that really interesting thing around spatial sound, in which it is already happening in the club, because we aren't quiet. We are our own kind of regurgitating speakers. We are always responding to the sound that's happening. You can always hear the people around you at the same time. So we are within this kind of this circular mode. It's really interesting topics.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know what my question is, but yeah.
Well, maybe we can respond to it. Is there?
No, I had to think one of so again another quote from Quantum Listening is that Pauline says babies are the best deep listeners, and I had to think of an experience when you saying that, and I'd love to talk to you about it afterwards. So last year I was invited to come and give a listening workshop in Chemnitz, and then the space that was set up for me was kind of a bubble tent, one of these inflatable things, and I was like, oh, this is nice, because of the bubble tent. That of course drew in a lot of children. So instead of doing a workshop for an adult audience, is what I wrote the workshop for, who are interested in this notion of listening, I was talking to 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds about listening, and I just gave them little listening prompts, and they just started running around the space. And I had papers and pencils with me for the adults to write their thoughts on listening. These kids just started drawing like crazy, and it was one of the best workshops I've ever facilitated in my life. And I was like, this is what I need to bring to adults as well. And you're right, this notion of comparing them to what is experienced in a club, where in a club, because of the no rules, sort of, because there's rules as well, but this notion of having free space to play, I think it is very apparent. But we can accentuate it, and we can play with it even more, or make the people in the club, and I think the clubs that you're talking about are also more like independent spaces, like Garage Noord, maybe, we're talking about, smaller clubs where they are already built from a community. So the people that visit those places are very aware of the space they're in. But we can still play with that, and we just need to find a way for them to still exist, to sustain them, because we need those places to have the conversations that we talked about. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Also, thank you for the envelope. I wrote it down immediately.
It's interesting anyway to also think about how we can get more generations than just the 18 to 30-year-olds into spaces, like more children or more older or elderly people that are they also can dance. For them it's also healing, not just for the young people.
Angry women of a certain age. They're amazing. Get in touch with them.
I see there's a question.
Yeah. I think just a question, maybe a slight speculative provocation, because we've talked a lot about spatial audio as a technology, the affordances, and how it can create multidimensional spaces. We talked about deep listening in the audience, but I'm wondering if there's other, maybe near or far future possibilities of other dimensions that we can introduce, maybe a third actor. So if you had kind of full creative freedom and you had unlimited, let's say, money, what would this kind of multidimensional space look like?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I think, of course, smell is also very gimmicky, but it's also very nice to use. I recently did a project with vibrating floors, so it's like vibration. Actually, it's used a lot in a very gimmicky way, like also in more of a theme park way. But it actually really intensifies the bass experience in a way that's not harmful to your ears. So I think that would definitely be something you could explore. Yeah.
I would love a dopamine meter, like so that you can have constant monitoring of where the dopamine level is in the room. I think that would be the most precious tool for a performing artist.
That's like
cortisol and dopamine.
Dopamaxing. Dopamaxing.
Would you like to respond, Jan?
Yeah, I'm just digging in my brain to find an answer. But, well, I mean, it's not a new thing. We already have it. The architecture, I think, is a very important factor as well, and how we think about built environments, not only the four-wall kind of space, but generally our urban environments, and what we can do with that, and maybe how we can also have new ideas about transforming spaces in such a sense, you know. I mean, who knows? I remember Jan Werner, an artist we work with, was mentioning it in a talk we did. You were part of it. He was speaking about his wish that walls could move, or he was speaking about inflatable absorbers that he could send around and just change the room acoustics and stuff like that, and have even more dimensions, more complexity, more room to play. Yeah, why not? I mean, experimental architecture is very interesting. I know he's currently experimenting with the architecture department at the university in Berlin, the University of Arts, and they are experimenting with, how would I call that, wearable architectural elements in the group of contemporary dancers. So there is some kind of material that is like sheets that you can form, and then you put water on them and they harden. It's like concrete, but in wafers, so pretty lightweight. And so they have this idea of like, yeah, performers with these architectural modules and activating the space, creating reflections and absorptions, and then shooting sound at them and stuff like that. So that could be it. That sounds quite exciting. I don't know how it's going to be, but yeah.
I think it just makes a case for bringing as many people as we can into the practice, whether it's elderly or children or architects or carpenters or philosophers. We should also just meet each other a lot more.
Absolutely. I mean, what I just explained or depicted, this kind of idea is for, you can do this in the open space. You can invite everyone to become part of such a moment, right? And I think, that's a way more open idea about spatial sound, spatial perception. Yeah.
I would like to wrap up. Thank you for the incredible conversation. I think we can go on in a few directions still, but I want to kind of maybe land on where we are now, which is incredible, but also there's a lot of opportunities, and there's also some dangers that we talked about. But maybe bringing it back to us, the dancers, the listeners, to close off with is how behavior or learning things, where do you think we from today on we can be new dancers and new listeners, or maybe not new, but like enriched?
Maybe I'd like to point out that we are in the middle of having so much music created by AI, and I was listening to a playlist yesterday that absolutely blew me away. I think the very best we can do is have our children listen to a lot of human, live, good music. I think that's one of the biggest contributions we can do for the future of whatever it is that we are doing, because I'm a bit scared that 10-year-olds are going to grow up listening to 70-80% AI-generated music, and will maybe just lose care or the possibility of having being able to differentiate and really connect with sound and with a piece of art. So
Because that's now happening within the Spotify space, but it's soon coming to all other spaces.
It's there. It's there.
It's a matter of time.
Again, this like our responsibility as artists, as organizers, as people that deal with policies of funding, public funding, is to make them aware that the funding needs to be put into education, back in education. Like I remember I had music lessons at school. Those have been like cut out for years already. We need kids to go out and make music together. And these kids need to go to an elderly home and make music with the elderly people there. And then we need to come in as well. So like facilitating spaces for people to meet, for bodies to meet in real life and make music together or sound.
Yeah, I think we as people who are in the music industry, we should really be active agents against this algorithmic discovery and this kind of what is happening now, and really actively work on countering that, like maybe with like starting platforms that are something else than Spotify, or things with filters and with just human recommendations instead of algorithms.
Would you like to share some final thoughts, Jarl?
Not
to put you on the spot.
Well, I say again, I mean, this is this kind of simulated agency that we really need to get away of. This is the Spotify thing. Now with AI, you could make a remix of a track, techno version of whatever, and then probably send it to your friends on TikTok. And this is just not agency. That is just like you are fulfilling the role that someone has carved out for you and pre-configured. And I think when we are engaging with art and artists, I always see the artist as someone who is fundamentally convivial, is like really offering us an environment that is not necessarily fully safe, but we can trust the artist that they will take us somewhere, they will modulate what we experience and so on, but it will not be exploitative. And so to take people into that and make them aware of exactly this, you can experiment together with the artist and with yourself in that setting, I think. This is also, I don't know where I'm going with that, but at the end what interests me is that we have situations where people experience different things in the same room, and it's not a homogenized experience catered to you, and you have to already know that this is the way I should perceive it. And there might be subtle and slight differences, and then you actually have something to negotiate with the other people. You can also talk about it, you can exchange about it. I had that, you had that, I heard this part of the composition, you heard that part of the composition because it was different in this part of the room than in that part of the room. And this might be little, but if you extrapolate it to our social life, this is actually how we live together. We are always in kind of slightly different experience and at the same time the same. And we need to negotiate it constantly and then be somehow, I don't know, finding that common thread between us, right? Yes, exactly. So, and I think spatial audio can help with that if we do it right.
Tying the knot. Yeah. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it, and thank you for being here.